Hi there, and welcome to my presentation today. We're going to be talking about photorealism explained with SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Now, my name is Chris Mowat, and I'm joined here by a special guest, Jason. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, Chris, what's up, man?
How's it going?
I got this car model that I've been working on. I worked on it with Jordan Tadich and Andy Barnes and a whole bunch of really talented people during Slug Me 6, where we designed and built like basically an entire car, okay, during the 24-hour Le Mans.
Cool.
And I made this, I sculpted this model in X shape, and I finessed it a little bit in SolidWorks, but I've seen a lot of stuff online, people using SolidWorks Visualize, and the stuff that you've been making really is awesome. So I wanted you to have a shot at it and see if you can take, you know, this model to the next level and do something that's truly photorealistic. Okay.
Oh, for sure. Challenge accepted, Jason. I mean, you've got a beautiful car. You used, you know, the SolidWorks and 3D Experience platform tools to create already what I would consider to be beautiful. And I'd be happy to take it to the next level. So why don't we take a break? We'll go ahead and hang up for now. I'll take us through this presentation, and then I'll give you a call at the end and see what you think of what we've been able to accomplish.
That sounds awesome, Chris. Good luck, man.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, let's get into it. So in order to explain photorealism with SOLIDWORKS Visualize, I've broken this presentation up into 5 key areas. We're going to start by talking about what photorealism is, where it's found, and how it's achieved. Then we'll break it into the further categories which we will use to achieve that photorealism. It's going to start with modeling. Then we're going to move into materials. We'll then move into lighting and post-processing effects that can be added to the camera. With all of these tools, we're going to be able to achieve an end result that looks great and that Jason should be happy with. So let's go into, first of all, a discussion about photorealism. Because what is photorealism? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, it's the quality in art depicting real people, objects, places, and things, right? But specifically with the exactness of a photograph. When we take a photograph with a camera, it captures all the natural light, all the natural materials of the real world. And in order to replicate that, we use the tools like we see in Visualize to generate realistic-looking graphics. Now, where do we see photorealism? Nowadays, it's pretty much everywhere. If you've seen any kind of movie recently, especially a Disney or Marvel movie, it is probably 90% just computer-generated graphics. So where did this all start? Well, it actually originated, photorealism itself, as a movement in art in the 1950s, just referred to as photorealism, where we weren't doing any kind of impressionism anymore. We were moving towards photorealistic types of artwork. But now, in the common era, we're talking about computer-generated imagery, right? This is the graphics that we've seen in early movies like The Matrix that blew our minds and made it look like the impossible was in reality. So let's talk about some examples. Well, here's one right here. This is a beautiful image, and the question is it real or rendered? Right? This looks like a photograph to me. Now, this is actually developed by an artist called John Bader. Now, what do you think it is? We can look closer. Is it a photograph? Is it a rendering? What is it? It's actually a painting. So this is what I found on Wikipedia for an example of what photorealism is. We can see a lot of detail put into all the different areas in all the different materials in this image, and we're going to address those and what they serve, what purpose they serve in photorealism. Right? We've got wavy windows, we've got rust on the car, lots of little detail. So that's a painting. Now, what about something made with SolidWorks? Well, I made this for a rendering contest a few years ago, and everything in this image is fake. All of it is a 3D model, the wall, the tape, everything about this is not real, but I put an intense level of detail into the scratches, the tape where we have waviness, right? We can look a little closer and see all of that detail. So this is actually rendered with SOLIDWORKS Visualize, right? So this is probably above and beyond where we need to go with Jason's car. We want Jason's car to look beautiful, not necessarily, you know, tattered and weathered, but this is an example of the level of detail that can be put into a rendering to push that realism over the top. So this is one of the renderings that we'll end up with. Now this is Jason's beautiful car that I've detailed and added my materials to. And here we can see this beauty with its depth of field, with the lighting. Everything about it gives that pop of photorealism. So it's all in the details, right? Photorealism begins with modeling. In SOLIDWORKS, we have to add enough detail to get the model to look suitable, right? What you put into Visualize is what you usually get out. So we need to just detail this model just enough. Then we're going to talk about materials. So the tire tread, the brake disc that you're seeing here, right? Very detailed materials that fool the eye into thinking it's real. Then we'll look at lighting, right? Lighting is what we surround the model with to produce all of these reflections, and if you do it right, it really does a lot for the rendering in terms of photorealism. And then finally there's post-processing. So this can be done in Visualize Professional or third-party software, but this is where we add the final touches to an image to give it the glow in the headlights and the depth of field and things like that. So that's photorealism. Now let's talk about modeling. So in modeling, what we're going to pay attention to is, again, the detail. We're going to have to start with SOLIDWORKS and then pay attention to a few particular areas. First, we're going to look at our features, right? This model came from X-Shape, so it doesn't have any features on it immediately. It's got the net shape of the body. So we're going to be adding features to it. We're also going to be looking carefully at the appearances while we're in SOLIDWORKS. So yes, we're in modeling, but there are reasons why we need to put appearances onto particular areas. In particular here, you see that little blue area inside those little scoops. That's an example of something we need to do for later on when we get to Visualize. Image quality settings. This impacts the smoothness of those surfaces when we get them over to Visualize. We need to make sure that our document property for image quality is set to an adequate level. Fillets, fillets, fillets. Now it doesn't have to be a fillet feature as we're going to see in Visualize, but rounds is what I'm talking about. Sharp edges do not exist in the real world. At least the way that we view them, there's always a little bit of a round, and those rounds catch the light in a realistic manner. If you have perfect sharp edges that come from your CAD, it's not going to look that real. So let's take a look at what we can do in SOLIDWORKS with the model starting from what Jason has exported from X-Shape. So here we are in SOLIDWORKS. Now I've got the model imported that Jason created in X-Shape. At this point, it's really just like a solid body without features, so we have to add our detailing features to it using the standard SOLIDWORKS tools. Let's take a look at what those features were. So an obvious first starting point here is to add some wheel wells. Now I only actually need to add my detail to half of this model because we're going to just cut it in half and mirror it on itself again. That's a really easy way whenever we work with symmetry, and it also guarantees we won't make any mistakes that will make this an asymmetric looking car. Right, so those are our wheel wells. We'll move forward. We've cut it in half, and we've also added some detail to this cockpit area here. Right, so we've got a nice little fillet and a recessed surface right here to show that windshield. Moving forward, we also now have some headlight detail. I can go ahead and just hide this out, and we can see that inside here we've got some solid bodies that are added with different appearances. What these different appearances allow for is to independently add appearances and Visualize to these. Right? This is all one part file, so in Visualize when we get over, if I left all this the same color, one appearance would apply to everything. So here's where we separate those into the ways we want, so that we could maybe have two different color headlights or two different brightnesses, whatever the case may be. We can now adjust them independent. So the next step here, we have mirrored this over. I already hid this cover, but this is just yet again a surface that is going to behave as the glass for the headlight fixture. Come over to our last piece here. We've also added some cuts to the base. Let that air flow through to these diffusers here. So that's pretty much enough detail as far as geometry goes, but there's other considerations that go into the appearances. So if you want to independently change an appearance in Visualize, you have to have it as a separate appearance here in SOLIDWORKS. So if I want to change these appearances, we would do it right here, right now, so that we can adjust them independent later. All I'm going to do is add an appearance here. I'll click on my appearances. Now I'm not interested in using any of these like high-level sort of textured appearances. All I need to do is add a different color. So one of the colors that, or one of the areas that I need to add this color is inside this scoop here. And the reason I need to do that is there's not a whole lot of detail here. I'm going to use an appearance later that will hide that lack of detail, but in order to do it, I'm going to add some appearance here. And I'm going to do it to the surface or the face level so that I can click in here and change these all together. Now I'll just give them like a dark color here, and I'll make these over here the same. So again, the color's not as important as the fact that I'm just sort of divvying up the appearances across faces so that I can control them and visualize later. Right? There you go. Now, those were to faces, but you also have features that you can do this to. So if you click on a surface that belongs to a feature, right here is a cut, I can come over and I can apply an appearance to the different levels of that part. I can apply it to this cut here. I can also, because this is now filtering for features, I can click right here, and this will incorporate that fillet that's inside. I'll just change it to some color that's not already applied elsewhere. We'll go for like a dark color there, and there you go. And you can see that because I applied it to the features, it also applied to the back wheel. Those were cut with the same feature. Alright, the other stuff is all similar. We just have to make sure that we apply our independent appearances wherever they're necessary. Alright, so it looks like we're pretty good right now. We'll go ahead and call it a day. So if we want to send this over to Visualize, we need to make sure that we have enough image quality. I'll go ahead and switch over to my completed assembly here, and we'll take a better look. So at this point, we see our edges will eventually become like polygons. The closer you get, that's what happens to curved surfaces in SOLIDWORKS. Now, what you see here, as far as the clarity, is exactly the clarity that you're going to see in Visualize. So in order to make sure that all of our edges are nice and crisp, we're going to come over to our settings in our document properties and just confirm that your image quality is high enough. Now, this is a setting that for standard modeling is not the most important, right? It actually enhances the performance if we keep this lower in SOLIDWORKS, but to transfer this over to Visualize, we want that to be nice and clear. All right, so that's an important setting here. And the final piece that we need to discuss is the fillets, the rounds. It's not a mistake or a coincidence that I've put fillets onto almost everything that I can see here, even these little reveals. All right, I've actually also put a unique appearance inside here that will allow me to hide this lack of detail when I get over to Visualize. So all of this modeling considered, and all of the appearance application considered, we're now ready to bring this over to Visualize. Now that we've fully detailed the model that came from Xshape, thanks to Jason, we are now ready to move over to applying materials. So this is going to happen in Visualize. We need to take the car, get it over to Visualize, and start adding our materials. So let's talk about what's important when we have materials. We need to look at accurate appearances. When photorealism is concerned, we need to choose materials that are most like their real-life materials. So we've got the Visualize library that has a load of different categories of appearances, and each of those categories have different properties to make them look more like the actual materials. So the proper appearance choice is important here, right? A metal for a metal, glass for glass. Those are the types of things that we're talking about, but it gets more detailed than that because there are properties to all these appearances. So even within a metal appearance, we can add what are called textures to them to give you that extra little bit of realism. So like a brushed metal, for instance. This is where the texture mapping comes in, because when you add texture to an appearance, you then have to tell it how you want that texture to map across the model. So in this case, we're going to be having our tire with tire treads. That runs around a cylindrical surface, so we're going to see how we can manage that in Visualize. Then we'll look at blackout appearances. So this is a shortcut for being able to essentially black out an area of the model that's under detailed. And we'll see where I use that. It saves a lot of work because you can just hide your little mistakes. So let's take this model, bring it over to Visualize, and start adding these appearances. So here we are in Visualize, and we've got the model imported. Now we're in a preview mode, and we haven't added any appearances to it from the Visualize library. All we're seeing are the ones that came from SOLIDWORKS. First things first, let's turn on the rendering mode so that we can see how this looks. And the curvature is apparent. Absolutely beautiful curves, but most of these appearances are not suitable. For instance, we can take a look at these tires here. They're just gloss and shiny, right? I can actually isolate those tires if I want. I can hide this car body, and we can take a look right here. So the point is that we need to add some realistic appearances, and we have a library in Visualize for appearances. Now some of these appearances might just be basic metals, right? We can do like chrome, for instance. Come in here and drag this on to here, right? I can add a standard chrome perhaps to the DDS, and I can add a red anodized right here. Now these appearances can be adjusted, so if we come over to the Appearance tab and we scroll down, these are the brand new appearances that have been added. You can click on them and you can change them. This one looks more matte because it's actually got a texture applied to it. Now that's fine if you want that, but we can change other properties. We can change its roughness, right? Decrease that a bit. Now you might be noticing in here that this doesn't look very realistic when you get up close. This has to do with the fact that there are not fillets on these small details. The good news is that in Visualize we have access to a tool that allows us to change what's called a corner radius property. So this applies to parts in Visualize, meaning the individual objects that can receive appearances. Now let's just take a look at this right here. I can select it, go to the Advanced tab, and I can change this property here to have a virtual fillet. Look at how different and more realistic that looks. Same thing here. Zooming out, that looks pretty awesome. So now let's talk about appearances that have a directional texture. Things like wood grain or tire treads in this situation. We can go over to the Visualize libraries. You can actually access the Cloud library, which gives you a few more available. Now we've got different types of appearances here. I've got a sport tire tread displaced appearance, and all I have to do is drag it right on to where I need it. Now what we see here is this shape being mapped onto the surface. We can click on the Move tool to see what mapping technique or mode is being used. Now this is set to cylindrical. We can tell that because we've got a cylindrical map applied. Now what's being mapped are these two images here. These are just little 2D image thumbnails, and they're being wrapped around the surface. There are different techniques like box, planar, and all the others, but they're not going to give us the result that you need. Rule of thumb is basically just choose a mode that closely matches the shape you're applying it to. So you're going to notice that the appearance looks like it's not completely on the tire. You can move this appearance. You just click on it and you've got this Move tool here. You can move it side to side. All right, but you really want to make sure that you're in the accurate rendering mode or the fast rendering mode when you make these decisions, because sometimes it'll look different from the preview. Right, so we just adjust that as needed. And then we can just copy paste this to the others, and you'll have to just check on the others to make sure that they have the proper alignment. Now let's go ahead and add another appearance. We've got one from here as well called Tire Sidewall, and I'll drag that right onto here, and we can see that looks nice. Alright, now coming in, we'll see that this is actually another rubber. I can change this to look more similar to my tire tread. So we'll come over and I'll choose a different color. We'll just lower that a little bit until they match. Alright, now my mapping still needs a little bit of work, so let's go ahead and just pull this over until we are happy with its location. Looks good to me. Right, now we've got one more final place to add some of this appearance detail on the wheels. We have an appearance in Visualize called Used Brake Rotor. We can drag that over right on, go ahead and click on that material, and we'll see the properties for it. Essentially, we've got a texture that is a radial set of rings, and we are mapping that with a simple box map, which just projects it from the sides. That works for our application here. I'll just go ahead and paste that onto the others. All right, so those are our wheels. Now we're going to talk about the blackout appearance that I mentioned earlier, and addressing the reason why I made these different areas of the models different colors. So we've got these separately adjustable wheel wells because I colored those in SOLIDWORKS differently. I've also, if I click deep in here, we can see two little areas that correlate to where I added those separate appearances. Now, you've got an appearance available in Visualize called blackout. Now, blackout is found on the other category in the library. I've got it right here, and you'll see what it does. It just completely blacks out. It's pure black whenever we look at it. So another area would be up here. We could see in there, it just looks like a pocket, but if I drop blackout on there, it looks like it's a hole. All right, we've also got this little area inside here. I can just drop blackout right in there, and you'll see now it just looks like a shadow catcher. All right, so just with a little bit of blackout, we've gotten a lot more detail, and I can show those wheels again to view our final result. Pretty awesome. All right, so that is the material application in Visualize. Let's move on to our next step. With the appearances on our model dialed in, it's now time to start looking at the light. So lighting in Visualize can be achieved in a few ways. The most easy way is by using what are called HDR environments. And you're going to find these HDR environments within the SOLIDWORKS Visualize environment library. Now, an HDR is just a spherical image, and that is specially made to surround the model and project all of the light onto it. And that light has the impact of creating shadows and reflections. Now, there's properties for all of these environments, and you can dial them in to your whatever extent you'd like. So some of these settings would be the size and rotation of this sphere that surrounds the model. You can also flatten the floor. So if it's an image that takes place outdoors, you can make it look like it's sitting in the middle of a real scene. We also have brightness and gamma, and we can control the shadows and reflections that impact the model. So with all of these tools at hand, we can really use an environment to complement our model and make it look that much more photorealistic. Let's take a look and Visualize again and see how we can achieve that. Now is the time to take care of the lighting. So lighting in Visualize is managed using the Scenes tab, and we can see here that we have a few already. This is the one I'm ultimately going to go with, but let's explore the scenes themselves real quick. So this is an HDR environment. It's actually an image that's a sphere, and we can tell that if I zoom out, we can see that that's just a sphere, and we can increase the brightness, decrease it. Great. But this isn't a very realistic looking environment. We can see on our Libraries tab that we also have access to environments, and if I take a look here, we're on the cloud, so we see all the ones that we have and ones we can download. I'm going to go local, and we could try out a few others. Now, I know for photorealism, we're not going to want one of these black and white backgrounds. We're going to want something a little more colorful. For instance, we've got, let's see here, I like warehouse. This is always a great one because it includes very, very bright lights that display and come over the model perfectly. So let's take a look at this one first. We can come over to our Scenes tab, and you'll see that once you drag and drop one from the library, it's located right here. We can come over to the General tab, and we can see that we have another brightness slider, and we can rotate. We can also go to the Advanced tab and choose Flatten Floor. This is what makes it look like it's actually sitting right inside that environment. Now this is looking pretty awesome just with that change in the environment. Alright, let's look at some of the other properties. I've got another environment right here to show those properties. This is called Small Rural Road. I actually downloaded this offline. It's called polyhaven.com, formerly called HDRI Haven. So what we're seeing here is a flattened floor on an environment that's actually an image taken outside on a real road. So I can zoom in on this and see that this thing is looking awesome just right in the environment. So some of the settings, we'll go ahead and duplicate this just to illustrate. Some of the settings would include the size. So if I zoom out, we can take a look at the impact of these changes, right? I can make this sphere bigger or smaller. I can also change the height of the floor, which you'll see impacts how it actually sits on the road. So you're really only interested in what it looks like when we're close. So we can adjust these, see the differences it makes. Sometimes they're very, minimal. Make it real small. You see the difference. And what I've done is actually just made it tighter. So in my opinion, whatever works best, whatever looks best is the one that you should use. And I really like this right now. I think we've landed right on our lighting scene immediately. All we did was we found an HDR, right? You have them in the library. You can also add custom ones to your library. I've got a bunch right here, right? I could show you just one other real quick. We've got Canary Wharf, right? And look how beautiful this is, right? I can go over and I can flatten the floor, and it looks like it's really inside this environment, like immediately photorealistic. So let's go back to Small Rural Road. This is a car for the Le Mans after all, and we are all set with our lighting. So we looked at our HDR environments available to us. We ended up choosing one that worked best. That happened to come from an online resource, and it allowed us to immerse that car right onto a road, making it look like it's racing straight through the Le Mans. Now, what that ended up doing was giving us that extreme photorealism by placing this vehicle in a realistic environment. So that is great. We've gotten really close to a photoreal result, but we can push it a little bit further, and the way we're going to do that is with post-processing effects. So post-processing effects are the effects that can be added to a camera using tools in Visualize Professional, or you can use a third-party software to touch up the image. But these are the things that can be done to improve the model and the image overall. So depth of field. Now this is actually a camera effect that you can use in Visualize Standard and Professional. It adds that sense of depth that you would get from a true DSLR camera. Now there's also f-stops for those depth of fields where we can control the level of that blur and how far that extends in front or beyond the model. We also have camera filters. So this is where we can only use these tools in Visualize Professional, and these include color filters to give a whole gradient to the whole image, vignette to give it a little bit of a border that's sort of hazy and dark. You can darken the image, lighten it, add saturation, gamma, brightness, bloom. All of these are going to be little sliders that we tweak to make our image look just a little bit better, because the whole point here is that we are trying to create an image that's so real it'll evoke the emotion that we hope for in JSON, which is happiness and excitement. Alright, so let's take a look at how we can add these camera post-processing effects in Visualize to take our image over the top. We're ready now for the final touches using camera filters. Now, what we have is a camera tab in Visualize with, you can build multiple cameras if you'd like. We can create brand new cameras from scratch. I'll just click on New Camera and we can see how that's achieved. Zoom in, and that's looking pretty good. But there are a lot of different options within these cameras. So one of the things I'm going to change is this perspective here. That helps me out looking into the distance here, right? Let's just actually get to an angle I'm happy with. Alright, now we have other properties like depth of field. This is something that you'll have access to even if you have Visualize Standard. I'll click on Pick and I'll choose somewhere in the front Now what this will do is allow me to adjust an aperture setting and create a depth of field effect that focuses on the point I clicked but makes it out of focus to the foreground and background. Alright, so now we'll take a look at the filters. Filters are what we need Visualize Professional to access. So I can click on Enable Post-Processing, and I'm going to turn off what's called Apply to Geometry Only. This means that the changes I make here are going to apply to the environment, which is my background here, as well as the model. So I'm actually going to start at the bottom because the most important one for this, since we have emissive appearance on these headlights, I'm going to click on Enable Bloom. Now, Enable Bloom uses a threshold of brightness to adjust the glow, the bloom that we have around here. Now, that's a bit intense. Let's actually just adjust this. That's a bit of an intense glow, so we can change that intensity factor. You can also change your radius, so you can see how that impacts things. Right? Bring down the intensity. It's just some balance that you'll find. Right? I actually liked it a little more intense. We'll keep it right there. Now, the other options include things like vignette. You'll see how it just darkens in from the outsides. You can also add a color filter to the whole thing, so I can come over and just choose something like this and make the overall image look warmer than it did before. We'll also come over and you can darken the image, give it a little more contrast as well. You can lighten the brighter parts, or you can darken those. I kind of like a little bit brighter, gives me more of that bloom. You could choose how you want to treat your saturation. If you want to pull some out, overexpose it. I'm going to pull that back. Okay. I'm going to skip gamma. You can control the overall brightness of the image. That's not really of importance to me here. Right, that's too dark. That's good right there. And those are the settings. So this compared to this and that, right, is a big difference. So we're going to keep these post-processing effects on. We just create our final render in the standard way. Now let's go ahead and create a few other views. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a brand new camera, or actually rather I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this because it's already got my post-processing options applied. So I'll just click here and we'll come over to here. Alright, so now I have to readjust my focus point. I'll just choose the wheel here. And let's make this blur. So in order to do this, this is just a quick little introduction to some animation. What I'm going to do is make this wheel spin. So in order to make the wheel spin, we have to access and animate one of these wheels. Let me just go to my preview mode and I'll use my group selection, make sure I'm on the right group. Now what I can also do is change my pivot center to the group so that I can rotate this. Now the only problem is that that group also contains the caliper, and the caliper does not rotate. So we can get creative and you know, account for this, right? I can bring this out of that group, and that way it won't move. Then what we'll do is we'll click on the group and I'll hit K. This is going to allow me to begin this animation, and then I'm just going to rotate this like that. Now it doesn't matter how far it rotates, because I can make it rotate faster by just making it a smaller window of time. But the point here is that now that we have our time bar at a moment where there's some motion, I can come to the camera, and this is all again only possible when you're using Visualize Professional, and I can add motion blur. So I'll click on Enable Motion Blur. You're not going to see it until I turn on the rendering mode. And you can see that start to develop. Now you can change the shutter speed, so a faster shutter is going to result in less blur. Slower is going to result in that, you know, large degrees of blur. Alright, so that's how that works. Then we just fire off a rendering like we normally do. All right, so let's take these images and show Jason. Having added those last post-processing touches, I think we're ready to now share this with Jason. We've worked pretty hard on adding the detail, the lighting, the materials. I think Jason's really going to like it. So let's give him a call. Hey, Jason, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Chris? How you making out over there?
I think I've got something great and you'll really like it. So why don't we get to showing you the renderings that I've been able to come up with?
Yeah, show me. I can't wait to see it, man.
All right. Well, let me just dig it out and boom, there you go. That's my first image. What do you think?
Dude, yes. Oh my goodness, it looks so real.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Chris, this is outstanding, man. This is incredible. I just want to jump right in this car and rip right now. Dude,
so do I.
So cool, man. I can't believe it. Look at the lighting.
Oh yeah, lighting. Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this scoop that you put in the front. Oh, it's so cool.
Heck yeah. Oh yeah. So, I mean, you already included a lot of the detail that made my job easy. I mean, Visualize made it extremely easy because we were able to just go in and add all those realistic appearances, lighting, and post-processing effects that you see there. I mean, it looks like it's moving, doesn't it?
It's amazing. I'm almost speechless, you know, like, wow. I mean, it's kind of emotional for me to see it, you know, start as just a concept to a model and to something like at this level. I mean, you definitely, you know, I've used Visualize before and had a really good time with it. There's a lot of features in there, but like, I mean, with the blur in the back and everything, this looks like a photograph. Well done.
Absolutely. Wow. Photorealism is the name of the game with Visualize. As long as we have enough detail in the model itself, we can use anything in Visualize, all these tools to make it look as good as what we've shown here. And Jason, I know you've got a lot to do, so I can let you go, but thank you very much. And I appreciate all your compliments here. We just use the tool. Visualize is the one to thank. So
yeah, thanks, Chris. I can't wait to show the guys at the user group and Slug Me 6 to show them what the cars turn into. This is outrageously cool. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you and take care. Having successfully came through with the delivery of a photorealistic rendering for Jason, we now should go back and look at the steps that we took to get there, right? We started this presentation with a discussion about photorealism itself, what it is, and how we achieve it. Then the rest of this presentation was the very specific aspects of what leads up to a photorealistic result. So we first started with the modeling in SOLIDWORKS, making sure we have the proper amount of detail to represent the model the way we want in Visualize. Then we went through in Visualize and we added appearances to it. And we added appearances that have textures, for instance, the treads to the tire, and dialed those in so that they looked realistic. And on top of that, we looked at lighting. And lighting was our way of surrounding the model with the proper light to make it look like it was superimposed on a road, which did a lot for us in terms of achieving that photorealism. And then finally we used the camera's post-processing effects. This allowed us to add that depth of field and those other tweaks to make that image pop that much more. So again, thank you for joining this presentation. On behalf of Jason Poole and myself, thank you for showing your interest in SOLIDWORKS Visualize, and we hope that you go out there and create your own photorealistic renderings. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.